The story of Adrielle and her fated alpha continues. In the first part, we saw the quiet daughter of a merciless wolf slayer face an impossible choice. Ordered to execute the captive alpha, Darian Thorne, she instead saw the reflection of her soul in his golden eyes. With a single strike of the ancestor's blade, she shattered his chains, her duty, and her entire world. Now in this dramatic continuation, their desperate flight begins. Having escaped the blood-soaked proving ground and the fury of her own father, Adrielle and the wounded alpha plunge into the merciless heart of the Shadowlands, a land from which humans do not return. The hunt has begun, and their story is far from over. The world was fire and ice. The silver bolt was a nexus of agony in my shoulder, a white-hot sun that sent out waves of freezing poison. The strength I had marveled at just moments before was draining out of me like water from a sieve, my powerful new wolf form flickering and threatening to dissolve. Through the haze of pain, I heard Darian's roar, and it was the sound of the world ending. It was the grief of 1,000 lonely nights and the fury of a soul seeing its only light extinguished. It was a promise of death. He moved, a black streak of vengeance that was no longer just a wolf, but an elemental force. My father had no time to reload. He dropped the heavy crossbow and drew the ancestor's blade from his belt, the same blade I had used to free my mate, now to be used to kill him. He met Darian's charge with the cold, practiced calm of a man who had faced death 100 times. Steel met claw in a shower of sparks. The cavern rang with the sounds of their battle, a brutal symphony of snarls, the grating of metal on stone, and the harsh, grunting breaths of combatants locked in a fight to the death. Darian was faster, stronger, a whirlwind of black fur and white fangs, but my father was precise. He moved with a hunter's economy, his body a coiled spring of lethal intent. He didn't try to meet Darian's force head-on. Instead, he dodged and weaved, using the blade not to kill, but to maim, to cripple. A shallow cut here, a deep gash there. He was whittling the great alpha down. I tried to stand, to scream, to do something, but my limbs would not obey. The silver's poison was a leaden weight in my veins. My vision tunneled, the edges turning dark and blurry. Through the bond that connected us, I felt Darian's pain as if it were my own. Each cut my father landed on him was a fresh spike of agony in my own body, layered over the screaming torment in my shoulder. I also felt his rage, a pure black tide of it, and it threatened to drown me. He hurt you, he will die. He hurt you, the thought was a drumbeat in our shared mind, a litany of vengeance. A part of me, the new wild part, agreed. It reveled in Darian's fury, wanting my father to pay for the pain he had inflicted. But beneath it, the girl who was Adrielle Corin wept. He was a monster, yes. A cruel, unloving man who had just tried to kill me, but he was still my father. The thought of watching Darian rip his throat out sent a wave of nausea and conflict through me, further weakening my hold on consciousness. "You see what you have wrought, beast?" my father grunted, parrying a savage lunge from Darian. "You have corrupted her, turned her into an abomination." Darian's only answer was a snarl as he pressed his attack, driving my father back toward the cavern wall. He was bleeding from a dozen small wounds, but his fury gave him strength. He was gaining the upper hand. Just as he lunged for a final killing blow, 3 new forms burst through the waterfall. Lyra, Boren, and Kael. They stopped short, their hackles raised, taking in the scene of pure carnage. Their alpha, bleeding and locked in combat with the legendary war chief, and me, lying in a pool of my own blood, the silver-fletched bolt a grotesque decoration in my shoulder. Lyra, the silver female, let out a sharp cry of distress that was both wolf and woman. Kael, the reddish-brown wolf, froze, his eyes wide. I could feel his shock and confusion through the ambient pack bond that now hummed in my senses. He saw the Corin he hated, yes, but he also saw his alpha's mate, a fellow wolf, struck down by the hunter's silver. His hatred had found 2 targets in the same room. "Darian!" Boren, the old gray wolf, barked, his voice a gravelly command. "The hunters are coming in force. We must go." Darian didn't seem to hear him. His world had narrowed to two people, me dying on the floor and the man who had done it. He feinted left, then spun right, his shoulder slamming into my father's chest and sending him crashing against the rock wall. The ancestor's blade flew from his grasp, clattering across the stone. He was disarmed. Darian stood over him, jaws dripping with saliva and blood, ready to deliver the final bite. "No," I managed to choke out, the word a pathetic, breathy sound, but Darian heard it. Through the bond, I pushed not a word, but a feeling, a desperate, agonized plea. "Don't." He froze, his head snapping toward me. His golden eyes were wild with bloodlust, but my plea pierced through the red haze. He saw me, truly saw me, and the feral rage in his gaze fractured, replaced by a dawning, soul-shattering horror as he registered how close to death I truly was. My fur was matted and dark with blood. My breathing was a shallow, ragged whisper. My father, seeing his chance, scrambled for his blade. But before he could reach it, Kyle was there. The younger wolf, torn between his hatred and his loyalty, chose his alpha. He launched himself at my father, not to kill, but to block, his body a wall of snarling muscle between the hunter and his weapon. "He chose you," a voice whispered in my mind. It was Lyra. She was beside me now, her silver form a comforting presence in the gathering darkness. She nudged my face with her cold, wet nose. "He chose you over his vengeance. Now you must choose to live." Darian was at my other side in a heartbeat. The rage was gone, replaced by a desperate, frantic terror that was even more frightening to behold. "Adriel, stay with me. Do not leave me." His plea was a torrent of emotion flooding our bond, a desperate attempt to anchor my fading spirit to the world. He bent his head, his teeth closing gently around the shaft of the crossbow bolt. A low whine of pure misery escaped his throat. He knew what he had to do, and he knew it would cause me unimaginable pain. "I am sorry, my heart," he sent, the thought laced with anguish. "Forgive me." He pulled. If the bolt going in was fire, it coming out was the universe tearing itself apart inside my shoulder. A scream of pure, undiluted agony was ripped from my lungs, and the world finally went black at the edges. As my consciousness faded, I heard my father's voice, raised in a strange, tortured cry of despair and fury at Kyle, who held him at bay. "You don't understand. That curse flows in her veins, just as it did in her mother's. Letting her live is a mistake you will all pay for." The words made no sense, a final, confusing riddle. As I slipped into the abyss, her mother's curse. My last thought was of Darian, his mind a beacon of frantic love and fear, and then there was only cold, silent darkness. I drifted in a sea of nothingness, a place without pain or thought. But slowly, warmth began to seep back in. A steady, rhythmic heat that pressed against my back. A voice, a deep, resonant murmur, was a constant vibration in the darkness, a thread to follow back to the light. It was Darian's voice. He was speaking, not in the language of men, but in the old tongue of the wolves, a series of soft growls, whines, and chuffs. It was a story, a prayer, a plea. He was talking to my sleeping soul. Refusing to let it drift away, I opened my eyes. I was no longer in the den. I was in a smaller, drier chamber, deep within the earth. The only light came from glowing moss that grew in phosphorescent patches on the ceiling, casting an ethereal green glow over everything. I was still in my wolf form, lying on a soft bed of furs and dried leaves. Darian was curled around me, his huge body a living shield, his head resting on my uninjured shoulder, the source of the warmth, the source of the voice. The pain was still there, a deep, throbbing ache in my shoulder, but the searing, poisonous fire of the silver was gone. I felt weak, hollowed out, but I was alive. I shifted slightly, and Darian's head shot up. His golden eyes, which had been clouded with exhaustion and grief, widened as they met mine. A wave of overwhelming, staggering relief washed over me through the bond. It was so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. "You are awake," he sent, his mental voice trembling. He nudged my face gently, a soft whine escaping his throat. I thought I had lost you. You saved me, I sent back. My own thoughts weak but clear. He shook his head. We saved you. He looked toward the entrance of the chamber. Lyra and Boren sat there watching us with weary eyes. Kyle was nowhere to be seen. Lyra padded forward. She was in her human form now. She was tall and slender, with long silver-white hair that seemed to capture the faint light. Her eyes were a startling pale blue, and her face, though etched with worry, held a serene grace. She knelt beside me, her movements fluid and silent. The silver poison was deep, she said, her voice soft and melodic. Your human blood fought it, but your new wolf body was tearing itself apart. We had to perform the rite of transference. She glanced at Darian, then back at me. He has taken the last of the poison into himself. He is filtering it with his own strength. He bound his life force to yours to keep you here. I looked at Darian. He did look tired. The lines of his face deeper than before, but the alpha strength in him burned so brightly, it was difficult to see any weakness. He had taken poison into his own body to save me. The magnitude of the sacrifice settled in my heart. A heavy, warm weight. Where is Kyle? I asked, projecting the thought to both of them. Boren, the old wolf, answered, his voice a low rumble from the shadows where he sat. He is standing guard. The hunters followed us for miles. He led them on a false trail to the east, to buy us time. The boy's hatred for your father is a powerful motivator. He hates me too, I said, the words spoken aloud in a voice that felt raspy and unused. He saw a wolf shot with silver, Lyra corrected gently. He saw his alpha prepared to die for you. Kale is many things, but he is not a fool. His loyalties are complicated, but he is pack. I laid my head back down, exhausted by the short exchange. My father's final words echoed in my mind. That curse flows in her veins, just as it did in her mother's. Lyra, or, I whispered, my father. He said something about my mother. He said I had her curse. Lyra and Darian exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them in an instant. It was a look of deep gravity. Adriel, Lyra said softly, her blue eyes full of a strange pity. The Corin line has been hunting us for 500 years, but your father's hatred. Valerius's hatred is personal. It is legendary, even among us. We always wondered why. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. There was a story, an old rumor, that your mother did not die in childbirth. The story says she fell in love with a wolf, and that your father killed them both when he found out. The air left my lungs. The chamber, which had felt like a sanctuary, suddenly felt like a tomb. My mother, the soft, weak woman my father always spoke of with such contempt. Had she been like me? Had she found her mate among the very people she was meant to hunt? And was my father's cruelty not just policy, but the festering, twisted grief of a man betrayed? It would explain you, Batal. Lyra continued, her voice barely a whisper. A wolf soul can lie dormant for a generation, passed down through the blood. If your mother was human, but her mate, your true father, was one of us, that would make you the first of your kind. A hybrid, born, not made. The revelation was a physical blow. I was not a Corin, not truly. I was the daughter of the man my father hated most in the world. I was the living embodiment of his wife's ultimate betrayal. His hatred of me, the coldness, the endless tests. It all clicked into place. He hadn't been trying to make me a worthy heir. He had been trying to crush the wolf out of me, to deny the very truth of my blood. Darian nudged me again, a soft grounding touch. That is his truth he sent. His thought a warm shield around my reeling mind. Not yours, your truth is here, with me, with your pack. He looked at me, his golden eyes burning with an unwavering certainty that defied all the lies I had been raised with. You are not a curse, Adriel. You are a miracle, and you are mine. His words were a balm on a wound I never knew I had. All my life I had been a disappointment, a failure, a traitor. But here, in the heart of the earth, surrounded by wolves, I was a miracle. I was home. My exhaustion was too great to process it all. Sleep was pulling at me again, a heavy, healing tide. As my eyes drifted shut, I felt Darian shift from his wolf form back into his human one. He lay down beside me, gathering my weary wolf body into his arms, holding me as if I were the most precious thing in the world. I rested my head against his chest, the steady, strong beat of his heart a lullaby. The last thing I felt before sleep took me was his lips pressing a gentle, reverent kiss to the top of my head. The cliffhanger was his promise, a quiet vow whispered into my fur that I heard in my soul. "When you wake," he murmured, "our life begins." The first few days were a blur of healing sleep, lived in the ethereal green glow of the moss-lit chamber. Time had no meaning in the heart of the earth. There was only the steady rhythm of Darian's breathing beside me and the low, constant hum of our bond. I remained in my wolf form, the shape feeling more natural, more honest than the human one I had worn for 20 years. The searing pain in my shoulder had dulled to a deep, profound ache, a constant reminder of both my father's cruelty and my own sacrifice. Lyra was a quiet, constant presence. She would appear with poultices of crushed herbs that smelled of mint and damp earth, applying them to my wound with gentle, practiced hands. She brought water from a deep, cold spring and strips of cooked venison, which she would leave for me to eat when I had the strength. Her pale blue eyes held no judgment, only a deep, weary empathy. In her, I saw the sister I never had, a silent pillar of strength in a world that had tried to break us all. But it was Darian who was my anchor. He rarely left my side. While I slept, he would lay in his wolf form, a warm, living wall of muscle and fur, curled protectively around my body. When I was awake, he would shift to his human form, his presence a quiet reassurance. He would tell me stories of the forest, of the stars as seen from the highest peaks, his voice a low, soothing melody that wove itself into my dreams. Yet I felt the price of my healing. Through our bond, which grew stronger and clearer with every passing hour, I could feel the echo of his burden. He never spoke of it, never showed it on his proud face, but I felt it in the quiet moments. A faint, sharp tingling in my own veins, that was a shadow of the poison he now carried. A slight tremor in his hand as he brushed hair from my face. The deep exhaustion in his golden eyes when he thought I was asleep. He was filtering the silver's taint with his own life force, and the effort was immense. He was a mountain, standing against a toxic tide for my sake. On the third day, I finally felt strong enough to sit up, the muscles in my shoulder protesting with a groan. Darian was instantly alert, his hand on my back to steady me. "Easy, my heart," he murmured, his voice thick with concern. "You are not yet whole. I feel the poison in you," I sent. My mental voice clearer now, stronger. I looked into his eyes, letting him see my worry. "It is a constant ache. You are hiding it from me." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, followed by a wry, tired smile. He couldn't hide anything from me now. "The bond does not allow for secrets." He sighed, running a hand through his tangled black hair. "It is a small price to pay. The silver will pass. It is my strength against its venom. A battle I have fought before." The casual way he said it sent a chill through me. "When?" I asked aloud, my voice still raspy. His gaze became distant, shadowed by a memory that was clearly painful. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he looked at me, his eyes holding a raw vulnerability he would show no one else. "It is a story I have shared with no one. But you are not no one. You are my mate. You deserve the truth of the man who holds your soul." He told me of his pack, the one that had existed before the small, shattered remnant. They had been large, prosperous, the guardians of the northern forests. He had not been born an alpha, but had earned the title through strength and wisdom. His second in command, his beta, was a wolf named Marcus. They had been closer than brothers, raised in the same litter, their lives intertwined since birth. Marcus was ambitious, Darian said, his voice low and tight with remembered pain. He saw our ways as antiquated. He listened to the whispers of men who promised power, who offered an alliance. They promised a treaty, a shared territory, an end to the endless war. They said the Corin line was an anomaly that other humans could be reasoned with. He paused, the muscle in his jaw clenching. I did not trust it. An alliance built on promises felt like a trap built on air. But Marcus convinced many of the pack. He spoke of a future without fear, a world where our pups would not have to learn the scent of silver before they learned to hunt. The betrayal was so clear in his eyes, a wound that had never truly healed. He arranged a meeting, a peace talk, under a flag of truce. I went against my better judgment. It was an ambush, not hunters seeking a glorious kill, but soldiers, efficient, cold. They came with silver nets and chains. They did not want to kill us. They wanted to capture us, to study us, to break us. Marcus, he stood with them. He had traded his pack for a promise of power. I felt a surge of fury on his behalf. So potent it was like my own. I laid my wolf head in his lap, a silent gesture of comfort. He stroked my fur, his touch a little unsteady. I fought, he continued. We all did. But we were outnumbered, betrayed from within. Many were captured. Many were killed. Lyra, Boren, and a handful of others managed to escape with me. I was wounded, a silver chain wrapped around my leg. It was Boren who chewed through the leather bindings to free me. It took weeks for the poison to leave my system. We have been running ever since, gathering what few outcasts and strays we could find who still believed in the old ways. He looked down at me, his golden eyes filled with a profound sorrow. That is why my pack is so small a Dryel. It is all that is left of a kingdom, brought down by a single lie. That is why trusting you, a human, goes against every scar on my soul, but I do. The bond does not lie. His confession settled between us, a sacred, painful truth. It explained the caution in Lyra's eyes, the weary cynicism of Boren, and it explained Kyle explosive, untempered hatred. He was a survivor of that massacre. Before I could respond, a new presence entered the den, frantic and sharp. Kyle. He burst into the chamber, his reddish-brown fur matted with dirt and burrs, his sides heaving. He was exhausted, but his eyes were alight with a grim, panicked urgency. He stopped short when he saw me awake, his hostile gaze faltering for a fraction of a second. But the news he carried was too dire for old hatreds. He addressed Darian, his barks and growls sharp and fast. The hunters are gone. The trail I laid was a fool's errand. Darian was on his feet in an instant, the weariness vanishing from his face, replaced by the sharp focus of an alpha. What do you mean, gone? Valerius does not give up. He has pulled them back, Kale reported, switching to a human tongue for my benefit, his voice a harsh pant. All of them back to the keep. But he left a gift behind. His men. They moved up and down the river all night. They poured something into the water, from barrels. The river runs black now, and the fish, they float on the surface. The deer who drank from it this morning, they are dead. He is poisoning the heart of the forest. He is not just hunting us anymore. He is killing our home. The horror of it settled over me, cold and absolute. I knew my father's mind. This wasn't a retreat. It was a siege. He couldn't find us in the vastness of the Shadowlands, so he was destroying it from the inside out. He would make the forest uninhabitable, forcing us out into the open where his men could slaughter us. It was a strategy of total war. Cruel, efficient, final. Boren let out a low, mournful howl. Lyra's face was pale. All the streams will carry it. The game will die or flee. We cannot stay here. We must fight, Kyle snarled, his frustration boiling over. We attack the keep. A final battle. That is suicide, Boren countered, his old voice grim. They would cut us down before we even breach the outer wall. We must retreat, go north, beyond the mountains. And surrender our ancestral lands? Kael shot back, his fur bristling. They were trapped between a suicidal charge and a shameful retreat. I watched them, my mind racing. I saw the pack, their strengths and weaknesses, and I saw my father, his mind laid bare before me. I knew his pride. I knew his tactics. I knew how he thought. And in that moment, a plan began to form. A terrifying, audacious gambit that drew on both halves of my soul. "No," I said, my voice quiet but clear. The three wolves stopped their arguing and turned to stare at me. It was the first time I had ever addressed them as a group. "You are thinking like wolves. You have to think like him." I struggled to my paws, my legs still shaky. Darian was instantly beside me, his body a solid support to lean against. I faced them, the Alpha's mate, the Luna they had not yet accepted. "You can't attack the keep," I said, my voice gaining strength. "He expects that. It's a fortress, and you can't run. He will hunt you, and he has more men, more resources. He will always be one step ahead. Poisoning the river isn't just an attack, it's a message. It's meant to create panic, to make you predictable." Kyle snorted, his disbelief plain. "And what do you suggest, human? That we reason with him?" "No," I said, meeting his hostile gaze without flinching. "We cut off the serpent's head." I looked at the small group. 4 seasoned warriors plus myself. Not an army, but we didn't need an army. "He has pulled all his hunters back to the keep, the entire garrison. He feels safe there. He feels untouchable. But his power does not come from those walls. It comes from the loyalty of his men and the supply lines that feed them." I took a deep breath, the plan solidifying in my mind. "He has a forward encampment, 2 days' ride from the keep, where he stores the silver for his bolts and the poisons for his blades. It is his armory, lightly guarded because no wolf has ever dared to venture so close to human lands. We do not attack the keep. We do not run, we circle around, we raid his armory, we destroy his silver, we destroy his poison, and we set fire to his supplies." The chamber was silent, save for the faint dripping of water. Boren, Lyra, and Kale stared at me, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. "It will be a blow to his resources," I continued, my voice ringing with a newfound authority. "But more than that, it will be a blow to his pride. He will be forced to turn his attention away from the forest and toward us. We will lead him on a chase, on our terms, through terrain we know, and he does not. We will turn his hunt against him. We will bleed him, warrior by warrior, until he is alone." It was a guerrilla war, a strategy of misdirection and psychological attrition. A human strategy to be executed with the speed and lethality of wolves. Darian looked down at me, and through the bond I felt not just his agreement, but a wave of fierce, breathtaking pride. He saw me not as a victim to be protected, but as his queen, his strategist, his equal. I turned my gaze back to Kael, whose face was a mask of stunned confusion. He had expected weakness, fear, a human's plea for help. He had not expected a Koran's strategic mind turned against its master. For the first time since I had met him, the burning hatred in his eyes was replaced by something else. A flicker of grudging, astonished respect. The wall of his certainty had just begun to crack. The silence that followed my proposal was as heavy as the stone above us. It was Kale who broke it, his voice a low, incredulous growl. "Raid the armory? It's madness. That is Koran land. Every rock and tree is watched." "It is a risk," Boren conceded, his old eyes thoughtful. He looked from me to Darian, his gaze lingering on the unwavering support his alpha offered me. "But it is a wolf's risk. A daring strike, not a slow death by poison. The war chief will not expect it." Lyra, in her human form, stepped forward. Her silver hair seemed to shimmer in the gloom. "She is right about his pride. An attack on his own territory, on his source of power, it will enrage him. It will make him reckless." She looked at me, a new light in her pale blue eyes. It was not yet acceptance, but it was a thoughtful, piercing assessment. How would we even find this place without stumbling into a dozen patrols? The question was a test, and we all knew it. My knowledge had to be more than just a memory. He calls it the Northern Depot. It's built into the base of an old, abandoned quarry in the foothills. There's only one main approach, a cart track from the south. But I know the old goat paths my father used to test my tracking skills. Paths his men are too lazy or too proud to use. We can approach from the north, from the high ridges, under the cover of the cliffs. Darian placed his hand on my shoulder, a simple gesture of ownership and alliance that spoke volumes to the pack. The plan is sound. It is a blow they will not anticipate, and it gives us the advantage. We will be the hunters for a change. His gaze swept over the others, the full weight of his alpha authority silencing any further debate. We do this. Lyra, Boren, you will take what able-bodied wolves we have and begin scouting the area from a distance. Learn the patrol routes, the guard rotations. Kael, your speed is unmatched. You will be our messenger, our link. But to get close, to navigate the treacherous land between here and there, we will need a guide. A strange tension filled the chamber at his words. Lyra's expression grew somber. Alpha, you cannot mean Silas. Silas? I asked, looking at Darian. An old wolf, Boren rumbled, a note of distaste in his voice. Older than me and twice as stubborn. He was a master of the old ways, the paths that are forgotten. But he saw the betrayal of Marcus, the fall of our pack, and it broke something in him. He renounced all allegiance. He lives alone now, in the Grey Fells, a desolate, windswept land that no one claims. He trusts no one, serves no one. He will not help us, Kael stated flatly. He would sooner spit on us than lend us his aid. He owes me a life debt, Darian said, his voice leaving no room for argument. From long before the betrayal, he will see me. He then looked down at me and his next words sent a ripple of shock through the others. Adriel and I will go alone. Lyra took a step forward in protest. Brother, it is too dangerous. To go into the fells with her? She is still weak. Silas is unpredictable. Let me go with you. No, Darian said, his tone gentle but absolute. He was not just giving an order. He was making a statement. This is not a task for a warrior. It is a task for a Luna. Silas will see my mate at my side, and he will understand that this is not about the past, but about the future. He must see the strength of our new pack and the strength of our bond. He was placing his faith and the mission's success squarely on my shoulders, on our shoulders. The rest of you have your tasks. Prepare for the raid. We will return with our guide. The journey to the Grey Fells began at twilight. We traveled in our wolf forms, the shape feeling more and more like my own skin. Darian set a steady, ground-eating pace, but he was always conscious of my healing shoulder, constantly checking on me through the bond, a warm current of concern flowing beneath his alpha's focus. We left the deep, primordial green of the Shadowlands behind. The trees grew thinner, more stunted, clinging to the rocky soil. The air grew colder, sharper, carrying the scent of stone and high, lonely places. This was a liminal space, a land that belonged to neither wolf nor man. The ground was littered with the rusted remnants of old traps, the moss-covered bones of animals who had been caught in them, and a palpable feeling of sorrow that clung to the very rocks. As we ran, a new sense of partnership bloomed between us. He taught me not with words, but with shared instinct. He showed me how to place my paws on loose scree to avoid a rock slide, how to use the wind to mask our scent, how to read the subtle language of a bent twig or an unnaturally silent clearing. And I, in turn, learned to trust the whispers of my own nascent instincts. My human past was not a weakness here. It was a strange and valuable asset. I recognized the deliberate pattern of stones that marked a hunter's trail where he only saw a random scattering. I smelled the faint, lingering odor of tanned leather on the wind long before he did. We were two halves of a perfect predator. We rested in the lee of a granite outcropping as the twin moons rose, casting a silver and blue light over the desolate landscape. We shifted, the pull of our human forms, a quiet need for a different kind of closeness. Darian built a small, smokeless fire in a pit. its warmth a welcome comfort against the biting wind. He sat beside me, his shoulder pressed against mine. He was quiet, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames, but I could feel the turmoil inside him through the bond, a deep-seated fear, sharp and cold, that had nothing to do with my father or the coming battle. "You are afraid," I whispered, turning to face him. His golden eyes met mine, stark and honest in the firelight. "I have never been more afraid in my life," he admitted, his voice a low gravelly sound. "When that bolt struck you, Adriel, I felt our bond tear. I felt you dying. For 100 years I walked this world alone. I was an alpha, a warrior, a brother, but I was incomplete. I did not even know what I was missing until I saw you in that proving ground." He reached out, his hand gently cupping my jaw, his thumb stroking the line of my scar. "To find you, only to lose you to my oldest enemy. The thought is a poison worse than any silver." He looked away toward the darkness. "Now I bring you here, to this forsaken place, to face an embittered old wolf. I lead you into a battle against your own blood. I ask you to be a Luna to a pack that fears you. It is a terrible burden." "It is not a burden," I said, my voice fierce and sure. I placed my hand over his. "Darian, for 20 years I lived in a cage. I was a ghost in my own home, a disappointment to my father, a stranger to myself. I was nothing." I leaned in, forcing him to look at me. "You did not give me a burden. You gave me a life. You gave me a self. Letting me fight beside you is not a risk you are taking. It is a gift you are giving me. It is the only gift I have ever wanted." His expression softened, the fear in his eyes replaced by a burning, profound love. He leaned in and kissed me. It was not a kiss of frantic passion, but of deep, reverent connection. It was a kiss that tasted of wood smoke, wildness, and unwavering devotion. It was the sealing of a vow, a promise that we were in this together, not as alpha and protected mate, but as equals, king and queen. "Your father was a fool," he murmured against my lips. "He tried to cage the sun." We continued our journey at dawn, the intimacy of the night wrapping us in a silent, powerful cocoon. By midday, we reached the borders of the Grey Fells. The land changed again, becoming a labyrinth of towering, wind-scoured rock pillars and narrow, treacherous canyons. The silence here was different. It was not the peaceful silence of the deep woods, but a heavy, watchful silence. The silence of a predator's lair. "He knows we are here," Darian sent, his mental voice a low hum of caution. "He has been watching us for the last mile," I sent back, my senses on high alert. I could smell him, a scent like old stone, dried herbs, and the faint musky odor of a wolf. So old he had become part of the landscape. We followed a narrow path that wound its way to a sheer cliff face. Set into the rock was a cave, its entrance obscured by a curtain of withered ancient vines. This was Silas's den. As we approached, Darian let out a low, formal howl, a single clear note that announced our names and our peaceful intent. There was no answer. The silence stretched, becoming heavier, more menacing. Something is wrong, I thought, my hackles rising. The air itself felt tense, too tense. It was more than just the wariness of a reclusive hermit. "Silas!" Darian called out, his voice echoing in the canyon. "It is Darian Thorne. I have come to claim the debt." Still nothing. My human mind and wolf senses were screaming in unison. I scanned our surroundings, my eyes taking in every detail. The path, the cliff face, the rocks above us. It was the rocks that bothered me. A raven, which had been perched atop the highest pillar, suddenly took flight with a startled caw, as if it had been disturbed. But there was no wind. And then I smelled it. Beneath the scent of old wolf and cold stone, there was something else, faint but sharp, unmistakable, the clean metallic scent of oiled steel, and under that the acrid tang of human sweat. They were here. "Ambush!" I snapped through the bond. The single word a jolt of pure adrenaline. Above us, on the cliffs. Darian didn't hesitate. He didn't question. He trusted me implicitly. In the same instant my warning hit him, he was moving, a black blur of motion, slamming his body into mine and driving us both off the path and into the cover of a shallow overhang 20 feet away. We were not a second too soon. A volley of crossbow bolts hissed through the air where we had been standing, thudding into the earth with deadly force. They were silver-tipped, gleaming with a malevolent light. 4 men rose from behind the rocks above, reloading their crossbows. They were not my father's regular warriors. These were leaner, harder-looking men, dressed in dark leathers, their faces grim and emotionless. A contingency, an elite hunting party left behind for precisely this reason. "We are pinned down," Darian growled, his body shielding mine. "We cannot charge up the cliff, and we are exposed if we retreat." Panic tried to claw its way up my throat, but I forced it down. The Luna did not panic. The strategist analyzed. I looked around, my mind racing. The overhang protected us from above, but not from the sides. The hunters would simply move to a new position and pick us off. We needed a distraction. We needed another way out. My eyes fell on a pile of loose rocks and scree at the base of the cliff, just to our left. Above it, the cliff face was fractured, a web of deep cracks running through the granite. An idea, born of my father's lessons on siege tactics, sparked in my mind. "The cliff is unstable," I sent to Darian, my thoughts sharp and fast. "The vibrations, your howl. It could have weakened it, distract them, draw their fire. I have an idea." He gave me a single affirmative pulse through the bond. "Done." He burst from cover, not running away, but charging toward the cave, presenting a clear target. He was a magnificent, terrifying sight, a great black wolf roaring his defiance. "For the Shadowlands, ye hounds!" he howled, the cry a challenge and a war song. As I knew they would, all 4 hunters focused on him, the greater threat. They raised their crossbows. That was the opening I needed. I sprang from the overhang, running low to the ground, my powerful wolf muscles pumping. I ignored the hunters, focusing only on the pile of scree. I hit it with all my force, my claws digging in, my body a living, battering ram. It was like striking a solid wall. Pain shot through my healed shoulder, but I ignored it, pouring every ounce of my strength, my rage, my desperation into the effort. The rock pile shuddered. A low, grinding sound echoed from the cliff face above. A crack widened. A few pebbles rained down. Darian, seeing what I was doing, feinted a lunge up the cliff, drawing their attention again. A bolt grazed his flank, and I felt a flash of his pain, but he didn't slow. With a final, desperate heave, I pushed again. This time, the unstable rock gave way. With a deafening groan, a huge section of the cliff face fractured and collapsed. An avalanche of rock and stone cascaded down the path, directly beneath the hunter's perch. They cried out in shock and terror, but it was too late. The landslide didn't hit them directly, but it swept the ground out from under their position. 2 were carried away in the roaring tide of rock. The other 2 scrambled for purchase, their crossbows lost, their footing gone. Now the odds were even. Before the dust had even settled, Darian was on them. He scaled the treacherous, shifting rock with breathtaking speed, a vengeful shadow. I was right behind him. We met the 2 remaining hunters on a narrow, precarious ledge. They drew their silver knives, their faces pale with fear. They had come to hunt a beast, but they had found themselves facing a king and queen in their own court. The fight was brutal, primal, and blessedly short. These were not my father's men. I felt no conflict, only the cold, clear instinct to protect my mate and my life. We fought as one, our movements synchronized, anticipating each other's actions through the bond. Darian was a force of nature. I was a blade of precision. Within moments, it was over. We stood on the ledge, panting, our bodies slick with sweat and blood. The scent of our enemies was a foul stain on the clean mountain air. Darian came to me, nudging my wounded flank with his nose, his mind a flood of concern, relief, and a new, staggering emotion, awe. He had seen me not just as his mate, but as his partner in battle. He had trusted my human intellect, and it had saved our lives. From the dark entrance of the cave behind us, a voice, dry as old bones and rough as gravel, spoke into the sudden silence. It has been a long time since I saw an alpha listen to his mate. We spun around. An ancient, grizzled wolf stood there, leaning on a twisted wooden staff. He was scarred, lean, and one of his eyes was a milky, blind white. It was Silas. He had watched the entire battle from the safety of his den. His one good eye, a piercing, intelligent amber, fixed on me. Even longer, he rasped. Since I saw one who was right to do so, you had better come inside. Silas's den was a place outside of time. The air was cool and dry, scented with 1,000 years of dust. Dried herbs that hung in brittle bunches from the ceiling, and the faint, clean smell of old bones. The walls were a tapestry of carvings, a sprawling, intricate history of the wolves etched into the living rock. Generations of stories, hunts, and legends looked down on us from the stone. At the center of the chamber, a single shaft of moonlight from a fissure high above illuminated a smooth, flat stone that served as a table. The old wolf shifted back into his human form with a series of painful-sounding cracks and groans. He was ancient, his skin like tanned leather stretched thin over a frame of knotted wood. The milky blindness of one eye was stark against his weathered face, but his good eye, a sharp, penetrating amber, missed nothing. He moved with a stiff, pained gait, wrapping a tattered fur cloak around his thin shoulders before gesturing for us to sit on a worn bench carved from the rock. We followed, shifting back into our own human forms. The adrenaline of the battle was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and the sting of our minor wounds. I felt a tremor run through my hand, and Darian's instantly enveloped it, his strength a warm, steady anchor in the echoing silence of the cave. Silas lowered himself onto a stool opposite us, his one good eye moving from Darian to me and back again. He wasn't looking at us as warriors, but as a puzzle he was slowly piecing together. Valerius Corin is many things, Silas began, his voice a dry rasp like stones grinding together. He is cruel. He is proud. He is a masterful hunter, but he is not wasteful. Those men he sent were not common soldiers. They were his elite trackers, his knives in the dark. He would not sacrifice them on a whim, or leave them behind simply to guard the path to an old wolf's den. He paused, letting the statement hang in the air. He left them for you, girl. His gaze was so intense it felt like a physical touch. He knew you would come here, or someplace like it. He knew you would seek out the old ways, the old alliances. He is not just hunting you, Adriel Corin. He is terrified of you. I stared at him, the words making little sense. Terrified? My father had never been terrified of anything. He had held me in nothing but contempt. He thinks I'm a traitor, an abomination. No, Silas countered, shaking his grizzled head. He knows precisely what you are, and it is the one thing in this world he cannot control. It is the reason he has hated you since the day you were born. He leaned forward, the moonlight catching the silver in his tangled hair. He told you of your mother's weakness, did he not? He told you she died giving birth to you? Yes, I whispered, a cold knot of dread forming in my stomach. He lied. The words were flat, absolute, and they struck me with the force of a physical blow. He told you a story to cage you, to make you fear the very thing that gives you your strength. Your mother, Alara, was no weakling, and you are not a curse. You are her legacy. Darian's grip on my hand tightened, a silent promise of support. I could feel his own shock and confusion mirroring mine through the bond. Listen, my heart, he sent, a steadying current in my turbulent mind. Let the old wolf speak. Silas began to tell a story, his voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of a tale told 1,000 times. He spoke of a time 20 years ago, when the truce between the keep and the forest was fragile but holding. My father, Valerius, was a young, ambitious war chief, his marriage to my mother a political alliance meant to secure his power. Ilara was not like the other women of the keep, Silas rasped, his gaze distant. She had a wild heart. She found the rituals of the hunters stifling, their hatred a poison. She would walk the edges of the forest, not with a blade, but with a sketchbook, drawing the birds, the trees, the wolves. She was a watcher. She had a hunger for the truth of things. He described how she met a wolf, not just any wolf, but the alpha of the great northern pack, a powerful, charismatic leader named Ronan. Darian let out a sharp, involuntary hiss of breath at the name. "You knew him?" I asked Darian. "I knew of him," Darian said, his voice tight. "He was a legend, an alpha who united 3 warring packs and brought an unprecedented peace to the northern territories. He vanished 20 years ago. We thought he had been killed by rival packs." "He was killed by Valerius," Silas corrected grimly. "Ronan was like you, girl. He carried the old blood, the blood of the moon. He could walk as a man, could speak the human tongue as well as you or I. He met Alara in the woods. He did not see a Corin, an enemy. He saw a kindred soul, a spirit as trapped as his own people were by the endless war." The old wolf's gaze softened with a flicker of ancient memory. "They fell in love. It was not a sordid affair. It was a fated bond, as true and as powerful as the one you two share. For a few short months, they found a paradise in a world that only offered them war. She would meet him in secret, and he would show her the wonders of his world. He believed their love could be a bridge, a new beginning." I closed my eyes, a phantom image blooming in my mind. A woman with my face, her hand held without fear in the paw of a great silver-pelted wolf. My mother, not weak, brave, a dreamer. But Valerius was a man who saw bridges only as a way for the enemy to cross. Silas continued, his voice hardening. "He was possessive. He saw your mother not as his wife, but as his property, a symbol of his power. He grew suspicious of her long absences. He followed her. He saw them together. He saw her happy, truly happy, in a way she never was with him, and his pride shattered." The silence in the cave was absolute. I could hear my own heart, a frantic, painful hammering in my chest. He did not challenge Ronan honorably. A wolf slayer does not believe in honor for beasts. He set a trap, not with silver, but with fire. He cornered Ronan in his human form, alone, and murdered him. He brought his body back to your mother as a trophy, a warning. A choked sob escaped my throat. The image of my father, his face contorted with rage, standing over the body of the man my mother loved. It was too horrible to comprehend. "Your mother was already with child," Silas said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "With you. Valerius knew. He could smell Ronan's scent on her, on the new life she carried. His rage was boundless. He did not kill her. That would have been a mercy. He locked her away in the highest tower of the keep, to live out her days as his prisoner, a living testament to his power over her. Her spirit broke. The brave wild woman vanished, leaving only a hollow shell. She died birthing you, not from weakness of the body, but from a grief so profound her soul could no longer bear to remain in this world. The story was finished, the truth was out, and it was a weight that threatened to crush me. My entire life was a lie. My father was not my father. He was my mother's tormentor, my true father's murderer. His coldness toward me was not mere disappointment. It was a constant, simmering hatred for the living proof of his wife's betrayal. He wasn't trying to make me a warrior. He was trying to extinguish every last trace of Ronan and Alara from the world. Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. Darian pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly against his chest, as my body was racked with silent, shuddering sobs. He said nothing, but his presence was a shield, his mind a fortress of love and support around my own, protecting me from the storm of my own grief. "The curse he spoke of," Silas said, his voice gentle now, "is the blood that flows in your veins. Ronan's blood. It is a rare and powerful lineage, stretching back to the first wolves. It is the perfect balance of both worlds. The strategic mind of a human, fused with the senses and primal strength of a wolf. It is why your plan to attack the armory was so brilliant. It is why you sensed the ambush when even Darien did not. It is your birthright. I pulled back from Darien's embrace, wiping the tears from my face with the back of my hand. The grief was still there, a raw, open wound. But beneath it, something else was taking root. A cold, hard resolve, rage. He has spent 20 years trying to crush my father's legacy, I said, my voice shaking with fury. He has kept me as a prisoner, just like my mother. I looked at Darien, my eyes blazing. He will not win. That is the fear that drives him, Silas affirmed, nodding slowly. He sees Ronan's strength in you. He sees Alara's defiance. He fears you will become a leader, a uniter, more powerful than he ever was. A hybrid queen who could command the loyalty of both wolves and men who are tired of his endless war. He will stop at nothing to see you dead. Then we will stop him first, Darien growled, his voice a low promise of violence. He looked at Silas, his expression grim. We need your help, old one. The life debt is called. Guide us through these lands. Help us get to the northern depot. Silas was silent for a long time, his ancient one-eyed gaze studying me. He saw the grief, the rage, the newfound strength. He saw the daughter of Ronan and Alara, finally awakened. A life debt must be paid, he finally rasped. He stood up, his old bones creaking in protest. But I will do more than guide you. Valerius has poisoned the lands. He has broken the last of the old laws. He has brought his war to my doorstep. He picked up his gnarled staff, his knuckles white. The hermit of the Greyfells is done with hiding. I will help you plan your raid, and I will help you send the war chief a message written in fire and blood. I stood up, my body still weak, but my spirit forged into something new and unbreakable in the crucible of Silas's story. I was no longer Adriel Corin, the traitor daughter. I was Adriel, daughter of Ronan and Alara, heir to the blood of the moon. My past had been a prison of lies, but my future would be a blade of truth, and I would plunge it into the heart of the man who had taken everything from me. The journey back from the Greyfells was a blur of grim purpose. Silas, a ghost of the wilderness, led us through paths that were not on any map, through forgotten valleys and over silent, windswept ridges. He moved with a speed that belied his age, his knowledge of the land and instinct honed over a century of solitude. News of the ambush had reached the rest of the pack through Kyl's tireless running, and the mood at our hidden den had shifted from one of desperate hope to a cold, simmering fury. Silas's presence had a profound effect. He was a living legend, and his decision to rejoin the fight was a powerful symbol. He gathered the small pack, his one good eye sweeping over them, and with the authority of a seasoned general, he began to dissect my plan, refining it, adding layers of deception and contingency that I, in my inexperience, had never considered. For 3 days, we planned. We used charcoal on smooth stones to map the quarry, Silas adding details from his ancient memory, Darien from his tactical knowledge, and me from the hated lessons of my father. We became a war council of 3, our minds working in unison. Lyra, Boren, and Kael listened, their earlier doubts replaced by a focused intensity. They saw the seamless way Darien deferred to my knowledge of human tactics, the way my wolf instincts sharpened his own. They saw a true alpha pair, their bond a weapon as potent as any claw or fang. Even Kael's hostility toward me had transformed. It was no longer the personal hatred of a wolf for a Corin, but the fierce, impatient loyalty of a warrior for his commander. He saw the daughter of Ronan in my eyes, and the strategist of the pack in my words. He would follow me into the fire now, not because Darien ordered it, but because he believed in the plan. He believed in me. On the 4th night, the eve of our planned departure for the raid, Kael returned from a final scouting mission. He burst into the main cavern, his fur matted with sweat, his breathing ragged, but it was not exhaustion that marked him. It was a raw, unfiltered panic that sent a jolt of ice through my veins. "They're gone," he panted, his voice a choked gasp. The northern depot. It's empty. The hunters, the supplies, all of it. They cleared it out hours ago. The words dropped into the cavern like a stone. The silence that followed absolute and terrifying. Our entire strategy, our one hope, had vanished. He knew. Silas rasped, his knuckles white on his staff. Somehow the war chief knew we were coming for it. Darian stood, his body a rigid line of suppressed fury. A trap. He has pulled us out of the deep woods, and now he is setting a trap. But before he could say more, Kyle delivered the second, more devastating blow. He looked at Darian, his eyes filled with a grief and fury that was terrifying to behold. "It is worse, Alpha," he choked out. "Much worse. He did not just empty the depot. He left us a message." He swallowed hard, the words catching in his throat. "He has Lyra." A roar of pure primal rage tore from Darian's throat, a sound of such agony and fury that the very stones seemed to vibrate with it. Lyra, his sister, the only family he had left from the old pack, the one he had sworn to protect. Boren let out a low, mournful groan. My own heart felt as though it had been seized by an icy fist. "How?" Darian snarled, advancing on Kyle. "How could he have taken her?" "She was scouting the southern perimeter near the old fort," Kyle explained, his voice trembling with a shared pain. "Valerius's men were not where they were supposed to be. They changed their patrol routes. They came from the west, silent, downwind, a dozen of them. They used silver nets. She fought spirits of the forest. She fought like a demoness, but there were too many." He looked down at the stone floor, unable to meet his Alpha's eyes. "I was too far away. By the time I got there, all that was left was the scent of her blood, her fear, and this." Kyle nudged a small dark object on the floor with his nose. It was a strip of black leather, tied to a single silver-white hair. It was a piece of my father's gauntlet, a gauntlet he only wore on formal hunts, a challenge, an invitation. "The old fort," Silas whispered, his voice grim. "The one that guards the pass to the keep. It is a killing ground. High walls, a single entrance, a perfect place for an ambush." "He is drawing me out," Darian growled, the sound a low, lethal vibration. He began to pace the cavern, a caged storm of grief and vengeance. "He has my sister. He means to use her as bait to lure me into his trap." The logic was brutal and undeniable. My father had anticipated our every move. He hadn't just countered my plan. He had used it against us, creating a more personal, more devastating gambit. He knew Darian's one true weakness was not his pride or his strength, but his love for his family. He would not, could not abandon Lyra. "We cannot go," Boren said, his voice heavy with the terrible weight of reason. "It is suicide. We are 5 warriors against his entire garrison. We would be slaughtered before we reached the gates." "She is my sister," Darian roared, whirling on the old wolf, his golden eyes blazing with feral light. "She is my blood. I will not leave her to be tortured in a silver cage. I will go alone if I have to." "And die for nothing?" Boren countered, standing his ground. "Your death would not save of her, Darian. It would only leave the rest of us without an Alpha, hunted and broken. This is what he wants. He wants you to be reckless. He wants your love for your sister to be the weapon he uses to kill you all." A terrible silence fell over the pack. Boren was right. His logic was cold and unassailable, and that made it all the more painful. To walk into the fort was to walk into certain death, but to abandon Lyra was unthinkable, a violation of the most sacred law of the pack. They were caught in an impossible choice, torn between loyalty and survival. I watched Darian, my heart aching. He was being ripped apart. The Alpha in him knew Boren was right. The brother in him would rather die than listen. I could feel his torment through our bond, a raging sea of fury, grief, and a crushing sense of failure. He had promised Lyra he would keep her safe, and he had failed. In that moment, I saw my father's true genius. He wasn't just a brute. He was a master of psychological warfare. He had not set a trap for our bodies, but for our souls. He had found the one fracture point in the solidarity of our pack, and was hammering a wedge into it with all his might. I stepped forward, into the center of the tense circle. All eyes turned to me. "Boren is right," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the emotional chaos. Darian's head snapped toward me, a look of stunned betrayal in his eyes. He had expected me, his mate, to stand with his heart, not with cold logic. "We cannot attack the fort," I continued, meeting his burning gaze without flinching. "It would be a massacre. And that is exactly what my father wants. He wants you to charge in blinded by rage and grief. He wants a glorious battle, a story he can tell of how he slaughtered the great Darian Thorn and his mate." I let that sink in, then turned my gaze to the others. But we are not going to give him the battle he wants. I walked over to the stone map of the quarry, our now useless plan. With my finger, I drew a line from the fort back toward the keep. He has stripped the keep of its garrison. He has moved his best men, his entire force to the fort to spring this trap. He believes he is safe. He believes his home is untouchable. A new cold light began to dawn in Silas's eye. Darian's rage began to recede, replaced by a dawning, incredulous understanding. "He is using Lyra as bait to draw the Alpha away from his territory," I said, my voice ringing with a cold, hard certainty that I had inherited from the very man I was plotting against. "So we will let the bait work." I looked directly at Darian. "You and I said, "will go to the fort. We will make a show of it. We will let his scouts see us. Let them report that the great Alpha is coming, just as he planned." "Adriel, no," Darian started, but I held up a hand stopping him. "And while every eye in that fort, including my father's, is fixed on us, waiting for our suicidal attack," I turned my gaze to the 3 remaining wolves. "Silas, Boren, Kale, you will not go to the fort. You will take the hidden path Silas knows. You will bypass the fort completely, and you will attack the keep." The shock in the cavern was a palpable thing. It was a plan of such audacious, unthinkable madness that for a moment no one could even speak. "The keep is a fortress," Boren finally stammered. "A fortress with no soldiers," I countered. "He has left a skeleton crew at best, old men and boys. He has moved his entire war to the fort. You will not be laying siege. You will be walking through an open door. You will not go to kill. You will go to take a prize." I looked at Silas. "My father has a great hall where he keeps his trophies, the pelts of 100 wolves he has slain, but there is one he values above all others. A silver chain holding a single flawless amber stone. It belonged to my mother. It was Ronan's mating gift to her. He took it from her and wears it now as a symbol of his victory. It is the heart of his pride. You will take it. And you will take one other thing." I paused, the final piece of my plan clicking into place. The keeper of the histories, an old man named Lucius. He is a frail, gentle scholar who has served my family for 50 years. He is no warrior. He knows all the secrets of the Corin line, including the truth of what my father did to my mother. You will bring them both back, unharmed. "And what of you?" Kyle asked, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. "What of you and the Alpha at the fort?" "We will be a distraction," I said calmly. "We will give you the time you need. We will skirmish. We will howl. We will draw their attention. We will be the lightning so they do not see the flood that is about to sweep them away." It was a gambit of impossible risks. It required perfect timing, perfect trust, and a level of courage that bordered on madness. It meant Darian and I would be facing down an entire army alone. Darian stared at me, his expression unreadable. He walked over to me, his presence so intense it was like a physical force. He stood before me, searching my eyes. I did not flinch. I let him see it all. The cold strategy, the burning love for his sister. The absolute certainty that this was our only path. This was how we would win. Not by being stronger, but by being martyr. By being more ruthless. Finally he spoke. his voice a low, awed whisper. He did not cage the sun. He forged a queen. He turned to the others, all traces of his earlier rage gone, replaced by the calm, absolute authority of a true alpha. You have your orders. Kael, you will run ahead. If you see us fall before your task is done, you will not turn back. You will see it through. That is a direct command. He looked back at me, and in the privacy of our bond, his thoughts were a torrent of love, fear, and unwavering faith. My life is in your hands, Adriel. And mine and yours, I sent back, sealing our pact. Now let's go give my father the war he has always wanted. The air around the old fort tasted of iron and bloodlust. It was a cold, cruel fortress of gray stone, built generations ago to be a bulwark against the Shadowlands. Now its high walls and single, heavily guarded gate served as the jaws of my father's trap. We could feel the eyes on us long before we saw them, hundreds of them, hidden along the battlements, their anticipation a palpable, predatory hum in the air. Darian and I approached in our wolf forms, moving not with stealth, but with a deliberate, arrogant slowness. We were two lone wolves walking into an army's den, and our apparent lack of fear was a calculated act of defiance. Every eye was on us, every crossbow was aimed. The distraction was set. Through a faint, distant pack bond, I could feel the moment Silas, Bourne, and Kael slipped past the fort's perimeter and began their silent, desperate race toward the undefended keep. Now, all we had to do was survive. My father stood on the parapet above the main gate, a grim, commanding figure flanked by his lieutenants. He was not wearing his war chief's helmet. He wanted us to see his face, to see the cold, triumphant satisfaction in his eyes. He had the alpha and the abomination, both caught in a trap of his own brilliant design. So, his voice boomed, amplified by the acoustics of the stone courtyard. The beast comes for his bitch. Darian let out a low growl, a promise of retribution that rumbled in my own chest. Do not let him bait you, I sent through the bond, my thought a sharp, steadying command. Time. We are buying them time. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He understood. Our lives were now measured in the heartbeats it took for our pack to complete their mission. From the shadows of the gatehouse, two warriors dragged Lyra forward. She was in her human form, bound in silver chains that sizzled against her skin, leaving angry red welts. Her silver hair was matted with dirt, and a fresh bruise darkened her cheekbone, but her head was held high. Her pale blue eyes, filled with pain, found Darian's, and she gave a tiny, almost invisible shake of her head. Don't do it, it's a trap. She is a fine creature, my father called down, his voice laced with mocking praise. She fought well, a pity her alpha led her to this. He drew a long silver knife. Surrender, Darian Thorne. Come forward in your human form, and lay down your life. Do this, and she may live to see another moon. It was a lie, a poisoned choice. My father would never let any of them live. Darian looked at Lyra, his heart breaking. I felt his agony, his rage, his desperate need to tear the walls down stone by stone. But he held to our plan. He looked back up at my father, and instead of surrendering, he threw back his head and let out a long, defiant howl. It was not a cry of grief, but a declaration of war. A challenge. I joined him, my own howl harmonizing with his, a song of the blood of the moon that echoed off the cold stone. It was the sound of my mother's defiance, of my father's legacy. It was the sound of a queen standing beside her king. My father's face tightened into a mask of pure fury. Our defiance had shattered his script. He had expected a cowering, desperate plea. He had not expected this. So be it, he snarled. Archers, loose! The command was a death sentence. But we were already moving. We did not run from the walls. We ran along them, a blur of black and gold fur. We were not trying to escape. We were making them waste their ammunition. Arrows rained down, a silver storm that churned the earth around us. We dodged and weaved, our movements synchronized. A deadly dance of survival. An arrow grazed my uninjured shoulder. the silver a brief searing kiss of fire, but the pain only sharpened my senses. We were impossibly fast, impossibly agile. We were giving them a spectacle of defiance, making them use up their precious silver-tipped bolts on two targets they could not seem to hit. The hunters on the walls grew frustrated, their disciplined volleys turning into angry individual shots. This was what we wanted: chaos, wasted time. We ducked behind a rocky outcropping as another volley of arrows slammed into the stone. Darian's flank was bleeding from a shallow gash, and my shoulder was a throbbing knot of pain. "How much longer?" he sent, his breath coming in harsh pants. I closed my eyes, reaching out with my senses, past the noise and the fury of the fort. I focused on the faint thrumming connection to the rest of my pack. I could feel them. A frantic, urgent pulse of energy. They were at the keep. They were in that. "They've made it," I sent back, a wave of relief washing over me. "They are there now, just a little more time." My father's voice cut through the air again, dripping with contempt. "You cannot run forever, beasts. Your defiance is meaningless." He gave a sharp command. "Open the gate, send out the hounds." A groan of heavy timber echoed as the main gate began to lower. This was a new phase of his plan. He would not waste more silver. He would send his war dogs, massive, vicious mastiffs trained to hunt and kill wolves, to tear us apart. "This is it," Darian sent, his body tensing beside me. "They will try to corner us. Then we will not be cornered," I replied. An idea, desperate and lethal, formed in my mind. It was a strategy born of my father's own lessons. Use the enemy's strength against them. The gate opened, and a dozen warhounds surged out, their baying a discordant, ugly sound. They were huge, muscular creatures, their teeth bared, their eyes alight with bloodlust. Instead of running, Darian and I burst from cover and charged directly at them. The hounds, expecting us to flee, were taken by surprise. We met them head-on, a whirlwind of fang and claw. But we did not fight to kill. We crippled. A slash to a leg tendon, a powerful shoulder check to send one tumbling. We were a coordinated storm, disabling the hounds with a brutal wolfen efficiency that left the hunters on the walls watching in stunned silence. We broke through the line of dogs, and without pausing, we charged directly for the open gate. It was the last thing they expected. Cries of shock and alarm went up from the battlements. The men at the gate winch scrambled to raise it, but they were too slow. We were inside. The courtyard was a chaotic scene. Men who had been calmly watching a hunt were now scrambling for their swords, their discipline shattered by our audacious charge. We were no longer targets. We were invaders. My father's roar of fury from the parapet was almost lost in the din. He had wanted to control this battle, to direct it like a master puppeteer. We had just cut his strings. We did not try to fight our way through the courtyard. That was still suicide. Instead, we veered left, toward a narrow set of stone stairs that led up to the battlements. Our only chance was to get to Lyra, to get to my father. We fought our way up the stairs, a maelstrom of fur and fury. We were outnumbered 20-1, but we were fighting with a desperate, primal power they could not match. Darian was a black cyclone of destruction, his every move a killing blow. I was his shadow, guarding his flank, my smaller size and agility allowing me to slip under their guards, my own fangs tasting blood for the first time. The part of me that was Adriel Corin recoiled in horror, but the wolf, the queen, knew this was the price of survival. We reached the top of the battlements. Below us, the courtyard was a swirling mass of chaos. Ahead of us, at the main gatehouse, stood my father. He had descended from the parapet, and he was no longer watching. He held the ancestor's blade in his hand, its dark steel seeming to drink the light. The two guards holding Lyra stood behind him. "You have spirit," he said, his voice dangerously calm amidst the chaos. "The spirit of the beast who sired you. It is a pity I must extinguish it." He gestured, and the guards shoved Lyra toward the edge of the wall. It was a sheer 50-foot drop to the rocky ground outside the fort. "Now you have a choice, Darian Thorne," my father said. a cruel smile twisting his lips. Your mate or your sister. It was the ultimate impossible choice. The trap had been reset, more cruelly than before. I could feel Darian's spirit tear in two. He looked from me to his sister, his golden eyes a vortex of agony. But before he could choose, I made the choice for him. With a sharp bark, I leaped, not at my father, but at the guard closest to Lyra. My father, expecting me to be the lesser threat, was caught off guard. I slammed into the man, my claws finding purchase in his leather jerkin, my jaws clamping down on his arm. He screamed and stumbled back, releasing his hold on Lyra's chain. At the same instant, Darian, freed from his impossible choice, exploded into motion. He charged my father, steel met claw, the ringing clang of the ancestor's blade against Darian's hardened foreleg echoing across the wall. The second guard tried to shove Lyra over the edge, but she was a warrior. Despite the burning silver, she twisted, slamming her body into his knees, sending him off balance. My fight was short. The guard, terrified and in pain, shoved me away and drew his sword. But I was faster. I ducked under his wild swing and my jaws closed on his throat. It was over in a heartbeat. I spun back to the main fight. Darian and my father were locked in a battle of titans. It was not the elegant dance of a hunter and his quarry anymore. It was a brutal, primal slugging match. Darian's immense strength against my father's centuries of practiced wolf-slaying skill. For every wound Darian inflicted with tooth and claw, my father inflicted another with the dark, hungry steel of the blade. They were both bleeding, both tiring, their breaths coming in ragged, desperate gasps. Suddenly a horn blew, not from within the fort, but from far away, in the direction of the keep. It was a single, clear, piercing note. A signal. They have it, I thought. A wild surge of hope shooting through me. They have the prize. My father heard it too. His head snapped up, a flicker of confusion and disbelief crossing his face. What was happening at his undefended keep? That momentary distraction was all Darian needed. He lunged, not at my father's throat, but at his arm, his jaws closing with a sickening crunch of bone. My father cried out in pain and rage, the ancestor's blade falling from his numb fingers. It clattered on the stone, landing halfway between us. He was disarmed, beaten. Darian stood over him, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his jaws. His eyes were blazing with the promise of a final, brutal justice. No, I said, the word spoken aloud. I shifted. The transformation was a wrenching agony, my wounded body screaming in protest, but I forced it. I stood on the battlements, naked, bloody, and exhausted, but human. I was Adriel. Darian looked at me, confused, his bloodlust still riding him. I walked forward and picked up the ancestor's blade. Its weight was familiar, cold, and final. I was the daughter of the man it was meant to kill, holding the blade of the man who had raised me. I walked until I stood over my father, who was clutching his shattered arm, his face a mask of disbelief and hatred. It's over, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying over the sounds of the dying battle below. He stared up at me, not with fear, but with a final, consuming rage. You are a monster, just like her, an unnatural blight. No, I said, the truth of it settling in my soul, clear and absolute. She loved a man you murdered, and I am his daughter. I pointed the tip of the blade at his throat. This ends now. From the direction of the keep, 3 wolves appeared, running with a speed born of desperation and triumph. Kale, Boren, and Silas. In Silas's jaws was a silver chain from which hung a single glowing amber stone, my mother's necklace. The last of my father's men saw them. They saw their leader, broken and disarmed at the feet of a woman they thought was his daughter. They saw the wolves, not attacking but flanking her, as if she were their queen. Their loyalty, built on fear and a belief in his invincibility, shattered. Some threw down their weapons, others simply fled. The battle was over. My father saw the necklace in Silas's mouth. He saw the final, undeniable proof of his defeat. All the pride, all the rage, drained out of him, leaving behind something hollow and broken. "Kill me," he rasped, looking up at me. "Finish it. A Corin does not live with shame." I looked down at the man who had caused me so much pain, the man who had murdered my real father and imprisoned my mother. I saw the monster he was. But in his eyes, I also saw the broken, jealous man he had been. The rage in my heart cooled, replaced by a vast, empty pity. "No," I said, lowering the blade. "Death is a gift you do not deserve." I looked at Silas. "He will be a prisoner. He will live out his days in the cells of his own keep, with the truth of what he has done. He will live with his shame." It was a fate worse than death for a man like Valerius Corin. He let out a strange choked sound, a sob of utter despair. Darian, now in his human form, came to stand beside me. He took my hand, his fingers lacing with mine. Lyra, freed from her chains by Borin, joined us on his other side. The five of us, the heart of the new pack, stood together on the walls of the conquered fort, looking down at the ruins of an old war and toward the dawn of a new peace. The blade was still in my hand, no longer a weapon of my father's hate, but a symbol of my own power. A power I would use not to kill, but to build. 6 months had passed. The season had turned, washing the world in the vibrant, impossible green of late spring. The river, once black with my father's poison, now ran clean and clear, its voice a cheerful murmur over stones scrubbed free of their toxic stain. Life had returned to the Shadowlands with a fierce, joyful tenacity. Patches of sun-drenched wildflowers grew in the clearing where Darian had first collapsed, and the scent of pine and damp. Living earth had long since banished the lingering ghosts of fear and flight. I stood on the high precipice of the Alpha's Rock, the place where Darian had accepted his outcast fate, and where we now ruled a new one. The wind, warm and gentle, ruffled my golden-brown fur, carrying the sense of my world to me. The smell of my pack in the den below, the distant fragrance of blossoms from the human lands, and, on the deepest current, the unique grounding scent of my mate. I was in my wolf form, the skin I had once feared now a second home, as natural and as necessary as breathing. Below, the keep no longer looked like a fortress. Its stone walls, once a symbol of my cage, now seemed like a natural part of the landscape, softened by clinging ivy. The banners of the Corin wolf slayers were gone, replaced by a simple, unadorned flag of truce. The sounds that drifted up from it were not the clang of steel or the shouts of warriors, but the lowing of cattle and the distant laughter of children. It was a place of life now, not death. A familiar presence approached from behind, his paws making almost no sound on the rock. Kael. He came to a stop beside me, his reddish-brown fur glossy with health, the frantic energy of his youth tempered into the steady confidence of a leader. He was Darian's beta now, his second in command, a role he had earned with his tireless loyalty and courage. The burning hatred in his eyes was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective respect. "The pups are getting restless," he sent, his mental voice a calm rumble. "Borin is threatening to tell them the story of the Great Skunk War for the 5th time. A soft huff of amusement escaped me. "Then we should probably save them." "Luna," he said, his tone growing more serious. "Lucius has arrived from the keep." I turned my head to look at him, my wolfen gaze meeting his. "Is there trouble?" "No," Kael replied, "only news, and a request. He asked to speak with you." Together we descended from the high rock, loping down a well-worn path to the sprawling network of caves that now served as our pack's main den. It was larger than Darian's old sanctuary, a place he and Ronan had used as a neutral meeting ground in the old days. Now it was home to nearly 30 wolves, the survivors of Darian's old pack, a few strays who had heard of our victory, and even some younger hunters from the keep who, upon learning the truth of Valerius's tyranny from the old historian, had renounced their blood oaths and asked to learn the ways of the forest. It was a new beginning, a fragile, beautiful thing, built from the ashes of a war. I shifted as I entered the main cavern, the familiar, painless twist of bone and muscle leaving me in my human form. I pulled on a simple tunic and leggings, the practical close of my new life. Around my neck, resting against my collarbone, was the silver chain holding my mother's amber stone. It was always warm against my skin, a constant, comforting connection to the parents I had never known. Lucius was waiting, just as Cale had said. The old historian was frail, his back bent with age, but his eyes were bright and clear. He was no longer a servant, but a respected ambassador, the bridge between our two worlds. He bowed his head respectfully as I approached. "Luna Adriel," he said, his voice soft. "Lucius," I greeted him with a warm smile. "There is no need for titles between us." "A habit of a lifetime," he demurred. He held out a small leather-bound book. "I have finished the transcription. The histories are now complete. The truth of your father, your true father, Ronan, and your mother is recorded for all time." He paused, his expression growing somber. "I also bring news of the prisoner." I knew who he meant. "My Valerius." The name still felt like ash in my mouth. "He does not speak," Lucius said quietly. "He does not eat, unless forced. He just sits in his cell, staring at the wall, the shame. It is a poison more potent than any he ever brewed. His men no longer speak his name. He is a ghost, already forgotten." I felt a faint hollow echo of pity, but nothing more. He had chosen his own fate. His prison was not one of stone, but of his own making. "His request?" I asked, changing the subject. "The villagers from the lowlands," Lucius explained. "Their spring festival is in 2 days. Since the truce, they have had no protector. They have asked if you and the Alpha would honor them with your presence, not as rulers, but as guardians, as a symbol of the new peace." The request was a profound gesture of trust, a seedling of hope in a garden that had been salted for generations. "We will be there," I promised. After Lucius departed, I sought out Darian. I found him not in the cavern, but in a small, sunlit glade deep in the woods, the place where Lyra now cultivated her herbs. He was in his human form, kneeling in the dirt, his powerful hands, which had broken the bones of his enemies, now tending to a patch of delicate white flowers with a surprising gentleness. Lyra was beside him, her silver hair braided with small, cheerful daisies, showing him which leaves to prune. The sight of them, brother and sister, safe and at peace, filled my heart with a quiet, fierce joy. He looked up as I approached, and a slow, warm smile spread across his face. It was a smile that still, after all these months, had the power to steal my breath. The lines of exhaustion and grief that had been carved so deeply into him were gone, smoothed away by peace and time. The only remnants of our war were the scars, silver lines that mapped our survival on his skin, just as they did on mine. "The keepers of the peace," I said, my voice soft. "The keepers of the chamomile," he corrected, holding up a fragrant sprig. "Lyra insists it will help Boren's joints." Lyra laughed, a sound that was as clear and bright as a forest stream. She had healed, both in body and spirit. The shadows were gone from her eyes, and she was becoming the pack's heart, a healer and a diplomat who moved between our world and the human one with an easy, serene grace. I told Darian of the villager's request. He listened, his golden eyes thoughtful. "It is a good sign," he said. "A bridge. Ronan would have wanted this." He stood, brushing the dirt from his hands, and came to me. He took my hand, his thumb stroking the faint silvery scar on my forearm, where I had given him my blood. It was a mark of our bond, more binding than any vow. "We will go later that evening," as the twin moons began their ascent. He led me from the den. We walked in a comfortable silence, our steps matched, our thoughts a quiet, flowing river between us through the bond. He did not lead me toward the keep or into the deep woods, but back, toward the lands of my past. We came to a stop at the edge of a wide open field, the proving ground. It was no longer a pit of packed earth and old blood. Nature, in its relentless healing way, had already begun to reclaim it. Wild grasses, studded with the deep blue of lupine and the pale white of moon petals, swayed in the gentle breeze. The central post where he had been chained was gone, removed stone by Kael in a fit of symbolic fury months ago. This place, Darien said, his voice a low murmur in the twilight, was where my life was meant to end. And instead, it is where it began. He turned to me, his golden eyes luminous in the moonlight. I remember every second of it. The pain of the silver, the scorn of the crowd, and then you, standing over me with that blade in your hand. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw. I saw your soul, Adriel, caged, terrified but blazing with a light so fierce it shamed the torches. In that moment, I knew if I was to die, I would die at the hands of the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I was a fraud, I whispered, a frightened girl playing a part. You were a queen, waiting for her crown, he corrected softly. He pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around me, holding me against the solid warmth of his chest. I leaned into him, resting my head in the familiar curve of his shoulder. You freed me, in more ways than one. I thought of the ancestor's blade. It was not with me. It was now in Lucius's care, an artifact in the keep's library, its story recorded, a relic of a dark age, its purpose fulfilled. We freed each other, I said, looking out over the field. This was not a place of ghosts anymore. It was a testament to our beginning, a symbol of a choice that had remade the world. Our life begins now, Adriel, he murmured into my hair, echoing the promise he had made in the darkness of the cave when I had been so close to death. He held me tighter. No more running, no more fighting, only this. This. The peaceful silence of the forest. The unwavering loyalty of our pack. The steady, unbreakable love that bound us soul to soul. He tilted my chin up, and his lips met mine. The kiss was not one of desperate survival or fierce passion, but of deep, abiding peace. It was a promise of 1,000 quiet dawns, of a lifetime of shared hunts under the moon, of growing old together, surrounded by the family we had forged in the fires of war. When we broke apart, he was smiling. Come, he said, his eyes alight with a familiar wild spark. The night is young, let's run. We shifted, the change as easy and as natural as a breath. He, the magnificent black alpha, I, his golden brown Luna. We stood for a moment, two halves of a whole, our wild hearts beating in perfect time. Then together we leaped into the tall grass, our powerful bodies eating up the ground, a joyous, exultant song rising in our souls. We were not running from anything anymore. We were running toward everything. We were home,